Big mystery day, guys, regarding Interstellar Object, Comet, Spacecraft, space junk, rock, whatever the heck it is, 3I Atlas, guys. The Europa Clipper saw 3I Atlas near perihelion, and what it saw, guys, it adds to the mystery, and we have a new update of the sunward jet mystery. It is getting bigger, guys. Stay tuned for a very interesting video, as 3I Atlas almost has reached its closest point to Earth. That's the path it is on, and we have an update, guys. It'll blow your mind, and it directly connects to what I have said in the last two videos, because the new data hits the same new anomaly here. We have a new anomaly, our 16th anomaly. It's about the anti-tail, it's about the sunward jet, and now we have a spacecraft view near perihelion. So let's connect the dots, guys. And if you can, give this video an early like and an early hype. Press that hype button to support my channel. Thank you so much for doing this. So now let's get into this. The Europa Clipper saw 3I Atlas near perihelion, and that is a big deal, guys, because the Earth-based telescopes, as we know, had a problem near perihelion. Perihelion is the point when 3I Atlas was closest to the sun, and it was hidden for us from Earth, from view. So the comet was too close to the sun in our sky. So the sun glare blocked good viewing. But NASA's Europa Clipper spacecraft had a different vantage point. It could watch when Earth mostly could not. And now we have the images, guys. Europa Clipper has observed 3I Atlas on November 6, 2025 from a distance of 164 million kilometers. That's 102 million miles. And it has observed 3I Atlas for 7 hours. The instrument was the Europa UVS. That means Europa Ultraviolet Spectrograph. And we know, we've talked about it, the spectrographic images are the ones that we need to hopefully be able to determine if this thing is ET or if this thing is just a rock. So spectrograph is simple, guys. It's like a prism. It splits light into fingerprints, right? So you can tell what chemicals are present, and that is very interesting. So Europa UVS has recorded data on the abundances of elements in this famous gas plume around the nucleus of 3I Atlas. And I say abundance. What does that mean? Well, we just want to know how much of each thing is there actually. So it has detected several fingerprints: oxygen, hydrogen, and dust from the outgassing near perihelion. Outgassing means gas is escaping from the object into space. So let's have a look at this Europa Clipper composite image. This image is called a false color composite. So false color means the colors are not what human eyes would see. They are used to map different ultraviolet wavelength into colors so that we can actually see them. So they have created this by stacking brightness maps at multiple UV wavelengths. And what does stacking mean? Stacking just means combining multiple images to boost faint signals. And I have to mention Harvard professor Avi Loeb again, who's for me the leading guy in this. He says this image from the Europa Clipper is extremely valuable because it constrains the anti-tail and tail geometry near perihelion. We talked about this yesterday. This is quite the mystery. So when I say geometry, that means here the exact 3D layout of both jets, which direction things really point in space. So here's the key viewing setup. At that time, when the Europa Clipper observed it, 3I Atlas passed between the Europa Clipper and the sun. So the Clipper had a sunward viewpoint towards the sun, meaning it was looking from the sun facing side direction. So you can also call this, as Avi Loeb says, a downstream view of the anti-tail and the tail coming out of the nucleus near the sun. So in simple words, it's a special angle where you can see how the structures flow behind and around the object. Because with 3i Atlas, it's not only something flowing behind it, but also in front of it, this anti-tail that looks like you're driving through the fog with your truck and you have the lights on and the fog lights on. It shines to the front, but if someone watches you coming towards him, you can't really see the nucleus. You can't see the light bulb. All you see is like this foggy glow. So let's add some context. Guys, this is really important. Europa Clipper was launched in October 2024. It is expected to reach Jupiter in April 2030. And Jupiter, we know this is where our friend 3i Atlas is going miraculously with a probability very, very low, close to zero. It will orbit Jupiter and it will do 49 close flybys of Europa. Europa is interesting because it likely has a surface ocean that could support life. And after this Europa Clipper rendezvous moment that it had with 3i Atlas, 3i Atlas will reach closest to Jupiter as early as March 16th, 2026. So this shows us when we know the Europa Clipper April 2030, this is when it will reach Jupiter. But 3i Atlas, March 16th, 2026, it's just right where we are, passing by Earth. This shows how fast 3i Atlas is, how fast it is compared to human spacecraft. And I have to tell a joke what Avi Loeb said in a TV interview. He said he wishes he could board an interstellar traveler like 3i Atlas to leave the solar system faster than we can. So this is what we have from the Europa Clipper. And now we go deeper into the mystery, guys. Why is this sunward jet so tightly collimated? We scratched the surface of this, right? We're back to the anti-tail problem, which is an anomaly. But this time, our focus will be very specific, guys. Avi Loeb says the tight collimation of the sunward jet itself is highly unlikely. That means the jet is not getting wider. It's pretty precise. It's not very wide. It stays narrow. So that's what collimated means, right? Not a wide spray, a tight beam, like a flashlight beam. It's not like a foghorn. Images that we have, the latest images from just a day ago or so, and then all the images we've had previously, they show a tightly collimated jet towards the sun. It's not being pushed and widened by the solar winds that are facing it. Let's have a look at this. It's called Larsen-Sekanina filter image. Is this our clue? Our next clue? It shows the processed jet images. So these images were processed through a Larsen-Sekanina gradient filter. That's the scientific description of this. In plain language, this is an image processing trick. Basically, it highlights faint structures in comet comas and in jets. So our last anomaly that we said, the 16th anomaly that we have focused on the rotation axis alignment with the sun direction at large distances. It's very unusual that this is so aligned. So having a tightly collimated jet towards the sun before and after perihelion has a tiny, tiny, tiny random probability of 0.000025. That is 0.00225%. About 1 in 40,000. This is super low. But there's also a second layer. The jet stays collimated. We talked about this yesterday, within 8 degrees out to 500,000 kilometers. That is 310,000 miles. That's how long this antitail is. It's huge. It's crazy. And we talked about it. This is roughly the distance to the moon. And this is so highly unlikely, guys. And interestingly enough, Harvard professor Avi Loeb has just published a paper where he not only refers to his own findings and opinions, he brings in the opinion of 2 colleagues, Dr. Eric Keto, it's not about the diet, and Dr. Frank Lockien. Dr. Eric Keto's main point is, when it comes to this antitail, he says the pre-perihelion antitail is a sunward jet near the rotation axis. Yes, we've talked about this. It happens to align with the sunward vector. You see this on these images, that's the yellow vector. And here it comes, guys. And I've tried to animate this for you so that you get a better imagination. It spins like a rifle bullet. Isn't this great? A rifle bullet, a spinning rifle bullet, is reaching its point closest to Earth, and then it's shooting towards Jupiter. What Keto says, he says there is no necessary connection between the jets before and the jets after perihelion. And then Avi Loeb makes a reference to an earlier analysis from an image that the Hubble telescope has shot on July 21st when it was first discovered in 2025. That image implies that the pre-perihelion antitail must be a tightly collimated jet about 10 times longer than wide. 10 times longer than wide. So in the Hubble image, the feature extends towards the sun twice as far as its width. But we are viewing it from about a 10-degree angle off the long axis. So that, if we go a little bit scientific here, adds a projection factor of about 5.8. So the true length to width ratio becomes about 11.6. And according to Avi Loeb, the latest images show that the same kind of ratio with an opening angle of about 6 to 8 degrees. Really? The same after perihelion? That's why the big question in the room is, guys, what natural mechanism makes a tightly collimated antitail jet in the direction of the sun both before and after perihelion? Big question mark. Boof. Guys, do you have the answer? The rotation axis that we saw in July-August 2025 was aligned within 8 degrees of the sunward direction. So the base of the new post-perihelion jet would have been on the night side before perihelion. It has basically switched, right? And the base of the old pre-perihelion jet would be on the night side after perihelion, right? Because before it was at the sun, it was coming like this. This was the anti-tail, and the tail was this direction. This is the sun, was going like this, and then it passes the sun, right? So then the one that was this, that's the new anti-tail that's now facing towards the sun. So the jet source region that is active now on the comet, or whatever the heck it is, right, would have been in darkness earlier, and vice versa. So if these bases only become active when facing the sun, they must be very well insulated on the night side, right? So Avi Loeb says this is a non-trivial new anomaly for a natural comet, because heat normally leaks through material over time. Now we have a look at what Dr. Lockien is saying. He says a normal comet tail can be collimated after the fact by solar wind and sunlight pushing material away from the sun. But a tightly collimated antitail is really hard to produce naturally. Boof, there we have it. Even other people dare to say that. Because sunlight-driven sublimation over a sunlit hemisphere would tend to produce a broad plume, not this narrow beam. And guys, quick something that is nothing scientifically, but I've just seen a post with an image of, since it's Christmas, right? How did everyone find baby Jesus? There was this comet that was guiding the way, right? And now we're close to Christmas and we have that again. So what they're basically said in this small post, and this has actually, well, I said it's not scientific, maybe I'm wrong. NASA scientist Mark Matney has suggested a comet observed by Chinese astronomers in 5 BC could be the biblical Star of Bethlehem, like the celestial guide that led the 3 wise men to the newborn Jesus. And he says this shows that the story may have a real historical basis. Interesting, right? I just wanted to mention that as a side note. So Dr. Lokian also basically says, very, very strange that we have this narrow antitail, this narrow beam. It's basically hard to produce naturally. He proposes a hypothetical natural option though. He says a deep ice pocket shaped like a gun barrel could emit a tight beam. But then sunlight would only shine down that barrel briefly as the object rotates, right? So then, and this is interesting, because his natural explanation is not a full explanation for this. And then you would have to have the same gun barrel on the other side too. What a coincidence, right? If this is natural, it should have more the law of coincidence. But then he lists technological possibilities, but also notes issues here. He says, okay, let's mention propulsion, weapons, and then also a directed shield against sunlight and solar wind to protect electronics or biological content on 3I Atlas. And also, Professor Lerb says that he was also contemplating that idea. And then he ties the whole geometric anomaly chain together. Geometric anomaly because we have it on both sides, right? So Avi Loeb says the retrograde trajectory aligned within 5 degrees of the ecliptic was his initial trigger for considering a technological origin. And then the rotation axis alignment is another reason, like the spinning bullet. And now the collimated antitails before and after perihelion are adding to the mystery. Guys, I really have problems speaking right now. For those of you who watch my channel more often, you know I have these doggies, and Rudy especially is lying right underneath me, and guys, he's farting. I can hardly breathe. I don't know what this is. He's been doing this constantly for 2 days. So let's take a deep breath and try to continue. It's kind of smoking my senses right now. So the tightly collimated antitails before and after perihelion add to the mystery. So Ivy Lip says these are rare geometric coincidences, and he says NASA's different birth environment narrative does not explain geometric coincidences tied to the solar system's orientation. NASA is not saying anything, basically. They're not even trying to. They could even say we're trying to debunk these anomalies. They're not. So, and this is the interesting that he does. Then he multiplies the probabilities of all these anomalies, right? The trajectory alignment probability is 0.002. Rotation axis alignment 0.005. 2 independent opposite pole tight jets. 0.00025. So if the product, just these anomalies, just these, not the rest that we've already discussed over the last few months, product is about 1 part in 4 billion that this happens at a natural comet. But that's not all, guys. That's not all. Let's talk about the 16-degree deflection. There's an update. It tries to connect the geometry even more tightly. The sun's gravity bent the path by roughly 16 degrees and the jet is roughly 8 degrees. So we're getting a little bit into orbit geometry, guys, but don't worry. I'll explain this in a very simple way, but it's very important to know. Avilub says at perihelion, the object's direction of motion was shifted by the sun's gravity. What that means is gravity bends trajectories more when you pass closer and move slower. And he gives us the numbers. Perihelion distance, 202 million kilometers. That's about 125 million miles. Perihelion speed, 68 kilometers per second. That's about 42 miles per second. That is a deflection of 0.286 radians, which is 16.4 degrees. And then he says something really remarkable, guys. He says the deflection angle about 16 degrees is twice the opening angle of the anti-tail jet. That is about 8 degrees. Yeah, 8 times 2 is 16. And he proposes the geometric consequence. If one edge of the jet cone overlaps the sunward direction before perihelion, and then after perihelion, the other edge of an identical jet cone on the opposite pole could overlap the sunward direction. That means, in simpler words, the gravity bend could swap. Which pole's cone edge lines up with the sun direction? So he says, now that 3I Atlas is approaching closest point to Earth on December 19th, it's time to summarize the anomalies by theme. And this is what's important for us, the geometric coincidence / anomaly list. The retrograde trajectory aligned within 5 degrees of the ecliptic with a probability of 0.2%. And he suggests that is planned. Arrival time is fine-tuned to bring it to 29 million kilometers from Mars and 54 million kilometers from Jupiter, and to be unobservable from Earth at perihelion. So both times he gets the closest point to Earth, and he was invisible when it changed its direction to Jupiter, and it gets directly into Jupiter's hill radius. Jupiter is an interesting planet to build a station, like a base camp, so to speak. But that's not all. The forecast closest distance on March 16th, 2026 is 53.6 million kilometers. Close to this Jupiter hill radius, that is 53.5 million kilometers. That precise, guys, including that non-gravitational acceleration that we had near perihelion. I've reported about all this. If you want a further explanation of this, check out my playlist about 3I Atlas, guys, and like and hype this video, please. But there's more. So the geometric anomalies, right? So there's a possible interpretation about releasing devices at Jupiter's Lagrange points, where basically it can float, it needs minimal fuel to stay in position. So on July 21st, the Hubble image implies the pre-perihelion anti-tail is tightly collimated, a tightly collimated jet about 10 times longer than wide, similar to post-perihelion collimation. So symmetric, very, very weird. So it's difficult to understand how a sunlight-driven sublimation produces tight jets out to 1 million kilometers. No known comet has a physical sunward jet anti-tail that long. So for a technological object, a particle beam might mitigate risk from the solar wind impacting at roughly 500 kilometers per second and releasing 100 times more energy per unit mass than explosives. The rotation axis is aligned within 8 degrees of sunward direction at large distances. Probability 0.5%, 0.5. We talked about the wobble of the pre-perihelion sunward jet that requires the jet base within 8 degrees from the sun-facing pole. Probability 0.5%. The prominent sunward jet on the way out requires a similar coincidence near the opposite pole. So seeing tight sunward jets before and after perihelion, probability 0.0000025%. Post-perihelion jet base was on the night side before perihelion, and the pre-perihelion base is on the night side after perihelion. It switched. Very anomalous. For them to activate only when sun facing, they must stay insulated for a month. How can they do this if it's natural? Conduction in a natural body makes that very hard. And then we have the 16-degree gravitational deflection, which is twice the 8-degree opening angle, allowing a wobbling jet cone to produce a sunward anti-tail before and a counterjet after, with an 8-degree opening on both poles. So the degrees is also very, very strange. And then we have, let's not forget, the wow signal, the famous wow signal that they received once and it never reproduced. That came from the same direction as 3I Atlas. That's a arrival direction coincident, right? Within 9 degrees of that wow signal, that has a probability of 0.6% that this happens with a natural comet, right? But also, the composition shows a lot of anomalies. The gas plume has much more nickel than iron, similar to industrial nickel alloys. Nickel to cyanide ratio orders of magnitude larger than thousands of known comets, including Interstellar Object 2I Borisov. And then we have this anomaly that the gas plume only contains 4% water by mass, unlike familiar comets where water is dominating. So the plume might be from sunlight releasing ices and dust that accumulated on a potential technological surface in interstellar clouds. But we also have unusual physical properties / anomalies, guys. The nucleus of 3I Atlas is way more massive than what we've seen in Oumuamua, the first interstellar object, or 2I Borisov. But it's strangely moving faster than both of them. What? So there may not be enough rocky material in interstellar space anyways to deliver such a natural iceberg once per decade? That often? So it may have targeted the inner solar system rather than a random capture. And then we have this extreme negative polarization. This is unprecedented for known comets, including 2I Borisov, possibly related to the anti-tail. And then we have that it brightened near perihelion. It brightened faster than any known comet, and it was bluer than the sun. We discussed all these anomalies. If you don't understand what they are, please watch my other videos where I talk about these anomalies. I'll explain that in detail. This would explode this video, would getting even longer. But Avilib also adds an important caveat. The technological civilization could plant devices inside a natural object, right? So even if it's natural looking, it does not end the question in its framing. And he also, I've reported about this last week, Also, Avi Loeb mentioned this planetary defense campaign that mysteriously took place just now, although it was planned for later in 2026. So the International Asteroid Warning Network is collecting data between November 27th and January 27th, 2026. And he hopes that when the data is public, that we will be able to update on the probability of this being an alien, like ET. So guys, that was it for today. The Europa Clipper gave a unique near perihelion view that helped us constrain the tail and the anti-tail geometry, which is at the moment a very interesting part, right? The sunward jet, this anti-tail, remains our core mystery. And plus the fact that it stays narrowly collimated and that it appears before and after perihelion. So the geometry plus the gravitational angle creates really an eerie pattern that is hard to shrug off. And we haven't heard from NASA. Again, nothing. So please, again, hype and like this script. If you want to support the channel, link is here in the description. You can fill me up with coffee. And please check the videos here in the end screen. I'll also list the anomalies here, but one of these links, I'll put the one down here. That is the playlist. There you have all the videos, all you need to know, guys. But if you want to learn more about earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and landslides, subscribe and then go to my video start page and binge watch the videos. If you want to choose one of the 4 here, or there, I think I pointed in the wrong direction. They're here. So here on the bottom is the playlist. Click one and I see you in a second, guys. Merry Christmas.